What's up, everybody? Welcome to Move the Sticks. DJ Bucky with you, and we have got a fun show today. We are going to wrap up some of the big news here from the free agency world. We're going to then cross over into some draft conversation. Going to have Trevor Sikkema join the podcast. He is the lead draft analyst for Pro Football Focus, PFF. As everyone knows them, he does a great job, really does his homework, and someone we're looking forward to chatting with about this upcoming draft class. So a lot of ground to cover. Buck, how are you doing, man?
Man, I'm good, DJ. I am knee deep in this quarterback project that I'm working on. And so I want to kind of tap into your insight. So this project that I'm working on, just kind of like a little private project. So there's these things. We always are trying to figure out what's the secret sauce to drafting a quarterback. And later on, we're going to talk about quarterbacks and top 10 quarterbacks. But there's this thing where you remember the CBA changed in 2011. And so in 2011, we've seen more quarterbacks go into top 10. So from 1998 to 2010, there are 20 top 10 quarterbacks drafted. The hit rate on those quarterbacks was 8 out of 20. So it's like a 40% rate.
Yeah.
Well, the thing about the hits, the average starts for the guys that hit and played really well, 38 and a half collegiate starts. And so in that class, I just want to tell you, it's like Peyton Manning, it's Donovan McNabb, it's Phillip Rivers, Carson Palmer, and those guys. So now from 2011 to 2023, there have been 25 quarterbacks that we can evaluate. 10 of those guys have hit. The average starts for the guys that hit, 29.1%. The average starts for the guys that miss is 29. So I want to know if, looking back at the quarterback situation, did we do a better job of evaluating quarterbacks like prior to this, when it came to prior to the new thing where we're saying like, hey, we got the Ricky scale, it doesn't matter, let's just throw a guy up in there because it's not as expensive? Or is this just a byproduct of the game being harder to evaluate at the position?
That's great. That's a great question. My first thought is, see if you agree with me on this. I think the difference from the college game and the NFL game is greater now than it was back then. I think there was more similarity in how they played. So these guys played a lot more snaps in a game that was similar to the game they were going to be asked to play at the NFL level. I feel like now, I think that the complexity of the defenses that you see now, I think the elimination of some of the gimmies that you get in college versus the ability to do that at the NFL level, especially the RPO game. You know, we have RPOs, but the rules are slightly different. You can get away with more at the college level in terms of the lineman movement downfield than you can in the NFL. So I think it's a little bit easier to post numbers, to post stats, to play the position in college, and I think it's never been harder in the NFL. You know, even though the completion percentage is up and all that, I think it's just different. I think it's a little bit the game is more different. So that was my first thought. Second thought is I think if you look at some of those hits that you had in that previous era, I think you lived with the growing pains back then. So if you cut off some of those quarterbacks after their first or second year and said, well, we're moving on, we never would have seen them develop, the Drew Breeses to develop into being, I know it wasn't a first round pick, but seeing those types of players get better. Peyton Manning led the league in interceptions his rookie year. Like those things, you were given time. You don't get time anymore.
Okay, so here's a great thing. So when I talk about the hit rate, we're just talking about a solid starter. So going back to that previous era, when we talk about stars, the common denominator with all the stars, and when I'm talking about stars, I'm talking about Peyton Manning, Donovan McNabb, Carson Palmer, and Phillip Rivers, because all those guys were Pro Bowl players. So we'll consider that a star.
Yeah.
DJ, all of them over 40 starts. Peyton Manning, 45 collegiate starts. Donovan McNabb, 49. Carson Palmer, 44. Phillip Rivers, 51. Now, here's the other thing. McNabb and Manning started right away, but they let them play through their mistakes, and they eventually got to the other side. Carson Palmer and Phillip Rivers, they redshirted. Carson Palmer sat on the bench for 1 year. Phillip Rivers sat on the year for 2 years. But here's the thing. By the end of their third year in the NFL, they were Pro Bowl players. So when you talk about the patience that was exhibited previously, it doesn't exist. And I think if there's anything that we can use today is, we always talk about draft and develop, or a redshirt them, let them play through it and those things, but we never exhibit that same patience. So now when I go and I just look at the solid starters that have been able to play in the new era from 2011. Okay, now we'll just talk about a solid starter being a guy picked in the top 10 that gets his team into the playoffs. We'll just consider that like the bar. He may be a truck, he may be a trailer, but his team wins, so that would be a success. Robert Griffin had 40 starts. Marcus Mariota had 41 starts. Jared Goff had 37. Mayfield, 46. Daniel Jones had 36. And Trevor Lawrence had 36. We're not even saying, DJ, that those guys are great players, but it takes well over 30 starts to be able to be a solid player in a good environment or whatever. So the reason I bring it. So look, Herbert at 42, but they haven't been to the playoffs though, right?
Yeah, I've been to the playoffs.
But he's been a good.
No, yeah, he has. They lost to the Jags.
God,
27-7.
That's right. I can put him in there. So like the game. So like when you think about that part of it, let's look at this year's class. So in this year's class, the guys who have over 30 starts, Caleb Williams has 33 starts. And then like Jaden Daniels has 55. But the guys who've been superstars, the Pat Mahomes, the Josh Allens, they had 28. So now it's a coin flip between Drake May and JJ McCarthy, who is going to be the star. And so you talk about at the top of the draft, I'm swinging for the fences. Yeah. And so when we look at those two, to me, I think of the four, one guy's going to be a superstar, two guys are going to be solid, and one guy's going to flame out. So what is it the things that are going to separate the guys from being a star from a solid player? I think experience matters. But I think if you're going to pick JJ McCarthy and Drake May, and that's the debate, it's about looking at the traits and saying, which guy has more traits to be a superstar at our level? Because I'm chasing the Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen thing as opposed to the solid starter thing.
Yeah, and I think that those are great examples with Mahomes and Josh Allen, were exactly what you just said previously. Mahomes sat, patience. Josh Allen struggled, but you were patient to get through the struggles and come out the other side. So that's where I just kind of go with, okay, if you're gambling, just gamble on the ability up top. Look, I can't tell you if you're going to hit or you're going to miss, but I know that I'd want to get somebody that I'm not going to be looking to replace in 5 years versus taking somebody with a higher floor. I mean, you're picking all the way up there. To me, sorry, man, this is Las Vegas. You got to roll the dice a little bit and swing for the fences, because if you hit one, you're out of the quarterback market for the next 12 to 15 years. So if you hit on a high floor, okay, he gets in there, he's okay, functional, but then, man, 3 years, 4 years now, I'm right back in the same spot, just trying to chase the greatness. So I think you got to have, look, it takes courage, and might work out, might not, but I almost feel like you're all the way up there. You gotta swing for the fences and then be patient. That's really what it is.
So I think the bigger lesson to be learned out of all of this when it comes to the quarterback is not even really the experience. It's more so from our vantage point as a team builder, a decision maker. When we go on the quarterback, we're going all in, and we're telling everyone in the building, we need 3 years. Whatever those 3 years look like. It may be sit 1 year, play for two. It may be play for all three. But maybe everyone in the building,
play for one.
Yeah,
Jordan
Love. Everyone in the building has to have complete alignment on how we're going to develop the quarterback, and you can't fall prey to the outside noise saying that he can't play. You got to give him time, because it takes time for the quarterback position. If we look at the successes in yesteryear, all of those guys took time, and so I just think it's a fascinating thing, particularly when we talk about the top 10 and how we used to recognize the top 10 as here's where I want to get our Pro Bowl players. If you're going to take the quarterback there, you can't expect it to be instant grits. It has to be a long thought out plan that we're going to give this guy every opportunity to succeed, whether that means sit him down early or let him play through the mistakes. You have to have enough conviction about your pick that you don't waver in the middle of the conversation, in the middle of the plan.
And to me, it's patience and continuity. If I can be patient, let them sit and learn under the same system with the same coaches, then I have a way better chance, as opposed to just new. Like, there's ways to look at guys who've been thrown out there who weren't ready. And then on top of that, you've put them out there, they're not ready. And now you're changing coaches every year. No chance. You got no chance doing that.
Yeah, no, I think we have to do it, and we will stand it. We'll be on path to the draft. We'll talk about it on draft night. Like, hey, just give him time or whatever. And no matter what happens, as soon as that guy's picked, everyone's like, when is he going to get on the field? When is he going to play? If he's not playing, that's a failure. And it shouldn't be like that. Like, we should treat that position a little different than the other positions when it comes to the development part of it. We got to be honest and assess it like that.
Don't you think too? I think that you have to understand the roster that you have in terms of, okay, I can put him, like, I'll go way in the Wayback Machine, like a Mark Sanchez. Well, that team was really good. That team was loaded. So
Yeah.
I can play him earlier, and I'm not
Mhm.
going to ruin him because he's going to have an easier life playing
Yeah.
with this group that can run the ball, play good defense, and has a good offensive line. I think when you have, so in other words, if you took a guy, say you took, JJ McCarthy went to the Minnesota Vikings, like they can say, okay, we got a pretty good team. We got playmakers. We've got a really good offensive system. We've got a really solid offensive line. They just brought over Aaron Jones. Like they could take JJ McCarthy, and I think they don't necessarily have to redshirt him. I think they could put him out there, ask him to do, simple things with a lot of help, and he'd be successful. JJ McCarthy gets picked 3 by the New England Patriots. You don't want to throw him out there.
No.
Right now, your team's not ready for him right now. That's my opinion. I think the same player going to a different situation should determine whether or not they get on the field or not.
And I think you have to be able to honestly assess where you are. We talk about like when you drop the running back in, but the same thing with the quarterback. Where are we right now? You talk about the P's, right? The play caller, the protection, the playmakers. Where are we when it comes to that? Do we have a great play caller? Do we have enough protection around? Do we have playmakers that can lighten the load on him where he doesn't have to make all of these plays? Well, if we don't have those things, well, maybe we're in a situation where we don't want to play him. We want to keep him on the sideline, let a veteran go through that stuff while we're developing the other parts of the team. And then when the team is ready for him, now we can slowly integrate him into the mix. And it's the same thing for a good team. Hey, we got a good team. Everything around him is great. Let's put the young guy in and let's teach him how to manage it. And he goes from being the manager to the playmaker as he gets older, which is
time.
which in a way I would say there's not like Pat Mahomes is not the right case, but mostly what happens is while the guy is on the rookie contract, he should be more of the managerial type quarterback. Once we pay him, now I need him to be the playmaker because as I'm paying him more money, I have to remove some of the pieces around him. So he has to take on and show the greater responsibility for us to be able to move the ball and score points and win games.
Yep. And last year's a great example of those 2 quarterbacks, the first and second pick. When you turn on Houston and you see Laramie Tunsil and you see the playmakers they have on the outside, and you're like, okay, we're good. Put him in there. He's ready to rock and roll, and we can go. And then in hindsight, looking at how bad the setup was in Carolina, even though he was the first overall pick, Carson Palmer
shouldn't have played as
waited.
Yeah. Behind John Kidner.
You probably would have been better off letting him sit for at least a little bit, let him kind of get a feel for it, as opposed to throwing him right in there on a really, really bad team. So it's different. Even with the first overall pick, I'm saying that you have
no matter the talent. Yeah, no matter the talent. Yeah, no matter the talent, it is really about everything around him. And that position is so dependent upon everybody else being able to do their jobs at a high level that you have to be able to do that. And so whether it's Caleb Williams going to Chicago or whatever, like you have to be able to look where are we at. Can we put him out there and allow him to be himself? Or do we need to wait a while before we have the pieces and the infrastructure around him to succeed? I think all that matters. And you really brought up great points. The consistency and the continuity. Same coach, same scheme, growing within the system. That really matters.
Jordan Love is a great example.
If you keep changing the coordinators and stuff, it just makes it so hard for a young quarterback to have success.
Yep. And that's one of the reasons why, again, we could go in a lot of different areas, but that's one of the reasons why offensive coaches have the edge over defensive coaches when we're talking about these head coaching openings, because coordinators can come and go, but if the head man is an offensive guy, that system is his system. It ain't going anywhere.
Yeah, and that gives them a chance to maximize their potential when you have a young quarterback and a young head coach.
All right, Buck, before we take a break here and get to some draft talk, free agency, kind of put a bow on it. Man, a lot of stuff happened since the last time we were together. The running back market's insane, like just in terms of the volume of these guys. They weren't messing around saying, hey, we're going to take these gigs, and they took them. They were gone, all off the board. But running backs, we've got, the Kirk Cousins thing going to Atlanta, I think is pretty fascinating. Is there anything that stood out to you from the whole experience?
My comment on the running back situation, I think everyone knows what the running back market is. I think it's $12 million or lower. I think the running backs have a clear understanding of what it was. People were not waiting around. Hey, when those offers came through, yeah, I'm taking it. I'm not sitting here scrimmaging it. That's the best one. We're going. I think from a team's perspective, it might be a little indictment. No, it is an indictment on the rookie class that's coming in. I think teams had an opportunity to go to the combine, look at what was available, and they say, yeah, I'm gonna give me a veteran running back that has like pelts on the wall. So that's why you saw Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, and all these guys come off the market really, really quickly because teams wanted an established player. And I also think, and we've said this, I think the running back is tied to the quarterback more than people indicated. The better the quarterback, the lesser the need to have an A-level running back. The lesser the quarterback, the more important it is to have an A-level running back in the backfield to complement that. I think when you look at some of these things and where guys are, I think that explains why you saw some of the running backs go to the destinations where they ended up.
Yeah, one of my favorite moves, I'm just going through the list here of all the different signings. I always find it interesting when you have in-division moves because it's a double whammy, right? You strengthen yourself, you weaken an opponent, and there's been a bunch of them. I mean, obviously, the Saquon Barkley, Aaron Jones from the running back position staying in their own divisions. But I thought Patrick Queen signing with the Pittsburgh Steelers, when you're looking at free agency and you see guys that are older, getting paid a lot of money, you get a little nervous. This is a situation where a guy he's still getting better. Like he's still elevating. I think he's 24, 25 years old. He came into the league as a young guy. He gets a 3-year deal for $41 million. But adding some speed and athleticism to a Steelers defense, it's already pretty darn good. Obviously, when you have Watt and Fitzpatrick, you're got legit dudes at the top and the bottom. Now they got one in the middle.
So here's the thing, and you know it, man, because you sat in that rivalry, and you know how hard it had to be for Patrick Queen to say,
I know,
hey man, I
dark
go
side.
Across it. I got to go to the other side. Knowing how both of those teams talk about each other within the locker room, that's something. I also think is really interesting because Patrick Queen, I don't know if you saw the clip where he talked about how Mike Tomlin would talk to him before the game and be like, you don't even look like a Raven. You shouldn't be playing over there with them. and how Mike Tomlin might have had his eye on him for years, looking at him like, nah, that dude should be with us. He's one of our kind of players. Because it's uncommon that you see that crossover like that. But for him to identify Patrick Queen and be like, oh, yeah, you need to come with us. You need to be with us. I think that's fascinating. I think Saquon Barkley going from the Giants to the Eagles is interesting considering the rivalry and look how they played against one another for the Philadelphia Eagles. And we know the Philadelphia Eagles do not invest in running backs. So to me, it's a tremendous amount of respect that they have for Saquon Barkley. It also is an acknowledgement of we need to make sure that we set up our quarterback for success. And no matter what we paid him, we still need to make sure that we play a certain way. So what we used to do, like the instructions, remember the draft games we talk about, like, hey, here are the instructions that you play with a prospect. I think this is Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni saying, hey, regardless of what he played, like what he's paid is what he paid. That has nothing to do with how he has to play. I think the Eagles are trying to get back to basics for putting a plan that allows Jalen Hurts to play at his best. And Saquon Barkley being a presence in the backfield is critical to that. Very much the Christian McCaffrey factor. I think it could be in Philadelphia. Having a blue chip player in the backfield, I think could make life easier for everyone involved.
One of the things about the Eagles and Howie Roseman has such a good reputation for being able to be creative in how he builds out his roster. And when they go out and sign Bryce Huff, I think some people said, why would you do that when you already have Hassan Reddick and you have Sweat and there's talk that they're going to trade one of those guys? Why wouldn't they just keep those guys instead of bringing in Huff? Well, because it's a cake and eat it 2 situation. They're going to get a replacement for at least one of those two. We'll see if they end up trading them. They've got Nolan Smith who they took last year in the first round. So now you bring in a talented player at an edge rusher and you freed up the ability to trade one of the other guys. So you're getting a pick. You're getting a pick as well as a player that's similar, or in their case, they're hoping is even an upgrade with the production Huff has had and the limited snaps he's had with the Jets. But it's a way where you're just creating another player. They're just creating a player by adding a player. So it's like a 2-for-1 special. You're getting Huff and a mid-round pick for Hassan Reddick or for Sweat, whichever, they decide to trade there. But that's a creative roster building idea there. The other thing is, was Rocky, right? It was a movie Rocky when Sylvester Stallone had Apollo Creed's picture on his mirror.
Yeah.
Remember, like he always had that mirror when he got up every day and looked at it. I think that's, maybe it's not John Lynch, but maybe it's a team photo of the 49ers. And I think it was like, 100%. You know what? They have Christian McCaffrey. Fine. I'm going to go get Saquon Barkley. So, whatever you do, we are mirroring and matching you, because this is who we have to go through to get where we want to go.
100%. It reminds me of the 90s when the San Francisco 49ers and the Dallas Cowboys kind of went back and forth. And Dion was kind of like the linchpin from that. You're always looking at where you're going. And when you look at the NFL landscape, I think it's fair for the Eagles and the Niners to say, oh, we're going to be right back. We are going to be the two teams that are the class of the conference. And we know that we're going to have to see each other. So why not engage in an arms race? I will also say this about the Philadelphia Eagles and what Howie Roseman is doing. One of the reasons, and this is something where Ron Wolf used to always talk about, like, best player available. You take the best player available regardless of the position, because what it does, it gives you the flexibility down the line to trade off a position of strength to get what you need. So last year when the Philadelphia Eagles took Nolan Smith, what Nolan Smith does is he gives the Eagles the opportunity to get rid of Hassan Reddick or Josh Sweat, to be able to get back something that they need in return. That's why you take the best player. You don't reach, you continue to build a roster full of good players. And then when you look at your surplus, you trade off what you have in excess to bring back something that can help you. That is a team building lesson. I think that's what Howie Roseman is showing us. Oh no, we collect good players, because there's nothing wrong with having a team full of good players. It only allows you to then trade off some of those to get even greater players at other positions.
And I think people need to realize on the Nolan Smith thing, not only was he behind those guys they had last year, 2 big-time edge rushers, his shoulder was jacked up. And there was talk, I remember talk that, is he going to have shoulder surgery before the season last year and miss the year? I think he played, tried to play through it in the limited amount of snaps he got. And I believe he had shoulder surgery right after the season was over. So you're going to get a healthier version of that player with an opportunity to play next year. So I just, to me, he's someone I really like going through the draft process, and I'm still bullish on him once he gets his opportunity healthy to get out on the field and make some things happen. But, I thought that was, it was fascinating what they were doing. And then when you look at some of the other moves, the Washington thing is interesting to me, because I think that there's people I've seen polar opposite takes on what they've done. And I'm curious to get your take. Because they've signed a lot of long in the tooth players with high character, leadership, culture establishing players. When you talk about bringing in a Bobby Wagner or a Zach Ertz or an Austin Eckler, you can say, okay, their best football might be in the rearview mirror and not through the windshield. But it does feel like they're trying to establish kind of a culture in the building here, is what my takeaway would be.
Look, people say this all the time. Culture eats up scheme. And so, like, they can come in with all the X's and O's and they can do all that other stuff. But if they don't have the right people, the right chemistry and connectivity, it won't matter. I think Dan Quinn certainly understands that. After you've been a head coach, you've gone to a Super Bowl, you've then been fired, and you spent a few years on the sideline as a defensive coordinator, you probably have a clear idea and a clear vision of what you want to build. And I think it's really important when you step into the building in Washington, and it's just been years and years of losing and mediocrity, you want people to change that. And so it's very much like, DJ, when we work for respective teams. I don't know if it was big for you when you were in Baltimore, whatever, but at Carolina, it was really big for us to get winners. We wanted people from winning programs, guys who know how to win, guys who do it. Because when you stand in front of the room and you say, hey, guys, we had to have commitment and accountability and trust and those things. Well, when you've won in college, like, you heard those messages in some way, shape, form, or fashion. When Bobby Wagner comes in and he has a Super Bowl ring, he knows what it is. And if you assemble enough of those guys who've won, they're going to take the young guys and be like, yeah, we're not going to do that. Here's what we're doing. This is how we win games. I think for Dan Quinn, is making sure you have enough guys that can play but still dispense those messages. Hopefully those older guys can still play at a high enough level that the young guys respect them and they heed those words of wisdom.
Yeah, Allegretti just came over too, right? Won the Super Bowl last year. Zach Ertz got a game-winning touchdown in the Super Bowl. So they've got guys who've been to the mountaintop there. Interesting how they've made that decision. Now, the one thing, I think Pep Hamilton might have mentioned this when we were on the other day. We were talking about what does Washington do with the second pick. I said Drake May. I think you said Jaden Daniels. Both said stick and pick the quarterback. Pep was advocating for a trade back because the roster was in rough shape. And the more I've looked at it, I would say I'm still believe with what I've heard that the top three teams are going to stick and pick it. And we'll go quarterbacks. But of the three, I could make a case that if I was obviously the Giants, they probably won't do it inside the division. But say if I'm Minnesota or Vegas, I don't think Denver's going to try and move up there because they don't have a ton of picks. But if you're Minnesota or Vegas, I think Washington might be your best shot. If you want to get up to the top 3, I don't think New England's going to get out of there. I think I was told their plan, everybody at the combine felt, and it's so far it's checked out, $8 to $10 million a year quarterback, rookie quarterback at 3. They went out and got Jacoby Brissett for $8 million. I'm just, okay, that's half of that's come true. So we'll see what happens with the next. But I think Washington, they have the 36th and the 40th picks. Those are high second round picks. You traded 2 to get to 11 with Minnesota. I mean, you could get a haul of picks from the Vikings. The Vikings, they are picking 11 and 42. Then you'd be talking about a bunch of future assets. But you could be looking at the Commanders, Freudian slip there. They are picking 36, 40. If they got Minnesota's 42, they could be 36, 40, 42, 11. Like now you say, okay, we don't have any talent on this team. I've got all these veterans in each of these individual position group rooms. Now I can put young, draftable, high-end talent in each of these rooms for these guys to develop, and then we'll do the quarterback drop-in thing later.
Yeah, I think you certainly can do that because when you're veteran enough and you're trying to establish a thing, like so let's say this with Marcus Mariota, and it's been a while since he's played at a high level, but he certainly can kind of hold it for a minute, like just hold it steady. I got steady because I have veteran guys on the defense that are trying to come in. Dan Quinn is obviously a good defensive coordinator. He and Joe Witt are kind of put together a defense that should be able to be competitive because as they're trying to take the ball away. But if they can run the football and do some of those things where, look, man, we're not saying that you're going to the playoffs that first year, but you're just rock solid. But if you accumulate enough draft capital where now you can attack the quarterback position and do some of those things next year or the year after that, now you're set up and you have a chance because it also doesn't necessarily have to be a quarterback that you draft next year. Maybe free agency, there's someone that it does. You do have the flexibility where if you're Washington, if you're not quote in love with these guys at the top of the board, you have some flexibility to be able to move out.
The other thing you could do if you're Washington is you could go down to 11 where Minnesota is. And then, I mean, you could probably, if you wanted to, I know that the Chargers, it's all been out there that they would love to get out of 5. So if you're Washington, could you go from 2 to 11, then come back up to 5? You still got extra picks, but you would still get the 4th quarterback. So say if you really like JJ McCarthy, for example, then you're like, you know what, I can get JJ McCarthy and a future 1 and a bunch of other stuff, and then I can, I'll still have extra picks.
It's about being creative when it comes to moving up the board to get what you want. And I think you have to really be able to assess not only your own team, but, okay, where are these quarterbacks? Which one do I like? Who's the perfect fit for me? What do they currently think about Sam Howell in the building? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the other thing that we also haven't talked about. Like, what is the feeling for them internally on Sam Howell and auctioning him off and trading him away and all that other stuff? There's just plenty of options. And I think we need to take more than just like a one-dimensional look at this. I think if you're Adam Peters and Dan Quinn, it's almost like you're playing the Rubik's Cube. What are the different ways that we can build up a championship caliber team? Does it have to be static where, hey, we just sit at 2, we just take whatever quarterback we want right here and we build it out? Or is there a different way to look at this where we really can build up a team? Because the one thing that we do know, the team that Adam Peters came from, the talent was immense. I mean, it was a super talented team. And I think when you see a team like that practice in front of you every day, I think you're more likely to say, hey, no, I want to build up a super team. And I don't necessarily want it to be completely dependent upon the quarterback. I want a team, and I want to be able to have a solid, functional quarterback that can be able to get it done.
The other thing you could say, and again, this is not the Minnesota Vikings episode, they're just on the brain right now, is, from Washington. So say Washington goes from 2 to 11, right? So then Washington doesn't come back up. So Washington stays at 11. You're Washington. You've got all these extra picks now. And at pick 11, you say, you know what, we can afford. We've got future 1s. We've got 3 second-round picks this year. We've got all these different opportunities to add to our roster. Hey, at 11, you know what? If it's Bo Nix or if it's Penix, shoot, roll the dice on one of those guys. We can roll the dice, and we've got all these extra picks. Man, if we hit, holy cow! Wait, I mean, we are rolling now.
It's funny that you bring up the Minnesota Vikings, because I kind of wanted to get this out there, right? And I think people have heard about it, but maybe they don't. Vikings maybe loving a certain quarterback from North Carolina. I kind of want to give a little perspective on why the Minnesota Vikings may adore Drake May and why they may make a major push for that, right? So they signed Sam Darnold to come over. Well, Sam Darnold and Josh McCown played together, right? And then so there's a connection there. But did you know Josh McCown coached Drake May in high school?
In high school, yeah, we showed the picture at the combine. Yeah, sitting on the bench, his son and with Drake.
So when you start thinking about all of that stuff, like
I think they will effort. I think Minnesota will put forth a strong effort to try and get up to get Drake May. I think they'll make the effort. I just don't know if one of those teams up there will get out. Yeah, Buck, it's that time of year, man. We get to play all these different games of what could happen and you know, the excitement that is to come with this draft. When you've got quarterbacks, you've got intrigue. We've got intrigue. So it's going to be a fun draft class. Speaking of this draft, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to visit with Trevor Sikkema, the lead draft analyst for PFF. All right, Buck, excited to welcome in our guest here. Trevor Sikkema is the lead draft analyst over at PFF. He's been doing this for a long time. I was talking to him before he came on about how I feel like I've seen his name forever. I've seen you know, his opinions and his work show up on social media on my feed forever. But excited to have him with us. Trevor, appreciate you taking the time today, man.
Yeah, only good takes on the timeline, I'm sure. No bad takes that I would regret that you may have seen over the years as I've been learning.
Everybody bats 1,000. Everyone bats 1,000 on this podcast.
No, I appreciate you guys having me. I was telling y'all beforehand, and I know that everybody out there listening can say this, but learned so much from you guys over the years. So it's cool to get to chop it up with you. Appreciate you having me.
No, I appreciate you joining, man. First question from me, and we'll kind of jump into this a little bit because I want to get your opinions on this group. Just give me the 30,000 foot view of this draft class in your opinion, having a chance to see what we have.
I think it's fun, especially at the premium positions, right? You talk about quarterback, there's plenty of intrigue there that comes with all the hype for the draft class. It kind of goes through the quarterbacks, but I think it's warranted. You got to get a lot of guys who can really have a chance to, you know, you don't want to put them too much on a pedestal yet. They haven't played it down in the NFL, but guys who have starting potential, and legit NFL tools. So I think that certainly checks the box there. But then you look at wide receiver, offensive line, pass rushers, corners, especially lockdown corners. I mean, you have all of the premium positions pretty rich with talent at the top. Now, is there a guy who could go number one overall at edge rusher? No, but still, you get a handful of players. It's really nice. You got some good depth to the class. And so normally, or I should just say sometimes that we have draft classes where the strength might be through tight ends or running backs or off-ball linebackers, safeties, things like that. And not that those positions aren't important, but when you get these premium positions where you got a lot of names to talk about, it's exciting for everybody because all 32 NFL teams are teams that have these top 32 picks. They get to talk about guys that will really change that unit that they're getting drafted to.
So whenever we talk about a draft, we have to start with the quarterbacks. What's your overall take of the quarterbacks? Who do you like?
I like it, man. I like this class a lot. You know, sometimes I think the closer we get to draft weekend, maybe the narrative or the hype for some of these guys gets a little overvalued, but such is the position, right? There's two types of teams in this league, ones that have quarterbacks and ones that don't. So you know you're going to overpay for one a little bit here and there. I think Caleb Williams is the easy QB1 in my opinion. You know, I've gone through this process and I look at some of the things that he does well versus the things that he needs to get better at. And a lot of the things that I feel like he needs to improve on, you can. And in terms of the natural abilities, I think that he is fantastic. And I'll also say this about Caleb Williams. I think people look at him in a Lincoln Riley offense and they think, oh man, it's a gimmicky offense. It's not going to translate well to the NFL. He can't really read the field the way he needs to. I think this guy's processing is going way underrated right now in terms of how he can see the field, how he can go through things. And that gives me a lot of faith for him to maybe not put on the crazy escapability, Mahomes-like stuff that we saw at the college level, at the NFL level, but still some stuff that's really going to impress you. I clearly have Drake May as my QB2 in this class. I like Drake a lot. Not to say that he's perfect, but again, that arm talent is so evident from him, you know, week in and week out. It's not something that, like I said, is a perfect thing, but especially when it comes to attacking over the middle of the field. The guy's got the most big time throws of any of the top quarterbacks that we're evaluating this year when it comes to the intermediate middle of the field, 10 yards to 20 yards down the field between the numbers. You got to be able to attack in that area if you're going to succeed in the NFL. Jaden Daniels, JJ McCarthy, they're right there as that next tier, that next package for me. I think all four of these guys are going to go top 10. That's just it. That's the way that it feels. Y'all have a lot more insight into the league than I do, but it just feels like the more that I read, the more that I hear, being at the Senior Bowl, being at the Combine, all of the scuttlebutt of what people are talking about, man, it feels like we're getting four quarterbacks in the top 10, top 13 at least, if the Minnesota Vikings, Denver Broncos, and Las Vegas Raiders don't end up moving up. And then I think Penix and Nix are those ultimate wild card guys right there. Okay, are they going to be worth first-round picks? But I think all six of those guys are worthy of top 50 flyers wherever you want to take them, depending on how high that ceiling is. And so to me, it's an exciting class because you have six legitimate guys who, sure, there's a preference in tiers with them, but all to me worthy of draft picks.
That's great. One of the things that I love about PFF, and we were talking about this again before we popped on here with PFF Ultimate, being able to sort everything. Every team's had this for a long time. I've been able to utilize the basically the same thing in NFL Vision, which is another program where you can funnel all your tape and watch cut-ups. But it makes everything so much more efficient when you're going through this process, especially at the quarterback position. I'm always curious talking to guys that are doing this. They're trying to crunch all this information on all these players. Is there a go-to for you with quarterbacks in terms of a cut-up? For me personally, I've been doing this for probably the last 7 or 8 years. To me, the 3rd and 7 plus reel is valuable just because you can cut out all the bubble screens and all the underneath stuff. Everybody in the stadium knows you're throwing. What can you do in those circumstances? Is there one for you? What's your go-to cut-up when you want to look at some of these quarterbacks?
Yeah, for quarterbacks, there's a lot of different categories that we can kind of slice it up into and see how a guy performs, which is why that ultimate tool is so fantastic when it comes to scouting. You guys know, like, sometimes it depends on the style of the quarterback, but generally you've got to perform well, to me, in 3 categories specifically. I want to see what you're like over the middle. Again, I mentioned that with Drake May. I think having a comfortable confidence to be able to rip a throw in a tight window and force a defense to say, man, I guess we can't sneak the safety a little bit further to the sideline, or I guess we can't
got to play in the mud.
Right. I mean, like, you've got to be able to rip it in between the middle to put that stress on defensive coordinators. Defensive players in the NFL are too good if you don't do that. So, like, Drake May, JJ McCarthy as well, his heat map over the middle is fantastic. So, like, that's somebody that I noticed from that category. Another one that I go to, you mentioned it, is that 3rd and long. Like what, and specifically, not just PFF passing grade, but how it looked, right? I recently went through this exercise. I wrote an article of, okay, who is the best on 3rd down? Now, the best on 3rd down, it's not just PFF passing grade. It's not just completions. I also take into account, like, okay, what was your average depth of target compared to what the down and distance was? And for the 2 guys that really stood out the most, the 2 guys that had the highest passing grade in that category, it was Bo Nix and it was JJ McCarthy.
Yeah, but JJ McCarthy's 3rd and 7 stuff is the best of the bunch.
It's fantastic. And I think that when I saw those 2 guys stand out, I went a little bit more into the weeds and I said, okay, well, what's the average depth of target compared to what the distance of the conversion was? Because we've got a short of the sticks and past the sticks percentage on there. And Bo Nix had a lot of 3rd down conversions. I don't want to take it away from him, but a lot of his average depth of target and throws were short of the sticks. And he's making the right play. He's converting the 1st down. I don't want to hold that really against him too much. But McCarthy was consistently almost 65% throwing beyond the sticks, not afraid to really try to rip it in there to make the throw that gets them the 1st down, not just let me dump it off and have a guy make a play. Neither are bad per se, but like those are 2, when you say, what's some stuff in some categorical sections when you're trying to evaluate quarterbacks, that's a really big one for me. And then the other one I would just say is a general, how do you play under pressure? Taking a look at those pressure plays. What gave you that sort of pressure? Did you bail from the pocket too early? How did you handle it in your face? And then something that I really like is progression from pressure, right? PFF data, it's best when you have a larger sample size. I think all data, that is the case. And when I get to evaluate you from at least a 2-year window, did you improve in how you played under pressure? Can I visually see that? Does the data back that stuff up? That means you're somebody who I think is going in the right direction in that area.
So many interesting things that you just dropped on us. Like, those nuggets. I think one of the things that DJ and I will always talk about is the most important part of any prospect, but particularly quarterback, is how they fit into the scheme. And so your breakdown of the third down reel, when you talk about throwing short of the sticks or beyond the sticks, to me really becomes a schematic equation. What is it that a team is looking for? Which quarterback best fits that? So, for instance, when you talk about throwing short of the sticks, that's almost like a Brock Purdy-like playmaker, a guy that is yak. You have wide receivers on the perimeter that can run after the catch. So when we think about the quarterbacks that you talk about, which one is the most scheme-friendly fit? Meaning it doesn't really matter where you drop him in. You have confidence that he's going to be able to succeed because he has maybe more pitches in his repertoire than just being a guy that's just a fastball pitcher.
Man, so that's a great question. I mean, I think Caleb just is the top overall talent. I mean, I'd just be taking him off the board because I think that he has the ability to do it all. So I think Caleb is the obvious answer for me. But I do look at guys like May and like McCarthy, and especially those middle of the field metrics that I have a heavy weight towards. Are you not afraid to really attack all levels of the field? And I think that to me is just really, really important. Can you attack not just all three levels vertically? Because a lot of people talk about, when they talk arm talent, they often like to say all the throws. And when we think of all the throws, I think a lot of people out there just think, can he complete the big 50, 60-yard bombs? Well, the fact of the matter is, there's a lot of quarterbacks that can, get the right trajectory, like you arch their back a little bit, pull the shoulders back, and you could put enough air under it to get it 50, 60 yards down the field. But true arm talent at an NFL level to me is, do you have the velocity to rip it basically anywhere on the field? A hot shot out route to the sideline, something in between cover two coverage. Can you get it beyond the linebackers right before the safeties? Like things like that. And so to me, I look at guys who have that supreme arm talent, guys like Drake May, guys like JJ McCarthy, who I also see from the data points of being willing to attack all those levels of the field. To me, that presents a scheme versatile type of player when you show me that ceiling that you could get it done with a lot of different types of offenses.
I love it. I mean, we could do quarterbacks all day long here with the time we have left. We got a handful of minutes left here, Trevor. I want to get to the wideouts, and the big three have been talked about, discussed. Everybody has their opinions on that. I don't even want to go there. I want to go to 4 and 5 for you. If you're looking for that next tier, and there's some interesting names in that mix, which one would you be willing to bet on? I don't care when they get picked, but in terms of who has the most success at the next level, who's outside that top three?
I feel like this is the toughest question right now with the whole draft is, who is wide receiver 4? I think I land on Troy Franklin as my wide receiver 4. Being a PFF guy, I feel like I have to, because he's performed very, very well in our system. Specifically, a metric that I like is missed tackles forced after the catch. This guy becomes a playmaker when he gets the ball in his hand. We know how smooth of a route runner he could be. We know he likes to get vertical. We've seen that before in the Oregon offense. But when they let him go short, those slant routes, those dig routes, things that might be over the middle or something to get the ball in his hand quick, I love that missed tackles forced after the catch, that rating that he has there. So he's up there. I'm also a sucker for AD Mitchell. I'm going to name a couple of names, so I'm going to cop out here, but I'm just going to shout out my guys. I've loved AD Mitchell, really, even going back to summer scouting. He was in my top 5 wide receivers going into the season because I watched what he did at Georgia, and you just see this guy continually be their option when they needed it most. Third downs, red zones, and his touchdown percentage, I think that you could definitely see that from him. So he reminds me of T. Higgins. He really does, and how fluid of a mover he is for a player of his size. He's somebody who, if he stay focused, he wants it. If he's got that fire in his gut, this dude can be a potential wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 at worst at the next level. People love Brian Thomas, the vertical ability. I mean, 4.33 40-yard dash at 209 pounds is nuts. I mean, you are absolutely flying at that point. Yep. There's some people that tell me, hey, he's just a vertical receiver. Shoot, if he's just a vertical receiver, so Buffalo Bills got to draft him at 28. It doesn't matter. He'll still catch 10 touchdown passes a year, it feels like, with Josh Allen. And then the other wild card in it, I love Ladd McConkey. Ladd McConkey is just such an underrated receiver. I feel, well, maybe not anymore. A lot of people are talking about him. But one of my favorite comps that I have, early comps, is he reminds me a little bit of Eddie Royal, right? He's a smaller guy.
Oh,
Eddie
cool.
Royal was
Yeah.
built. Eddie Royal
Virginia
was
Tech.
built different. You know, like he was a little smaller, a little more muscular, a little thicker, but both of those guys kind of had a shifty narrative about them, but both gave you more long speed than you expected, and they'll block their butt off when they're out there. So that was kind of a comp that reminded me a little bit of Eddie Royal.
Two things real quick on that. Sorry, Buck. Two things real quick. Number one, if you asked me the question, which receiver outside of those big three has the best chance to lead all rookies in receptions and touchdowns and ends up being the best of the entire class, I would say Adonai Mitchell would be my pick there, from what he can do there. The second thing off what you said, the one thing that I have with Troy Franklin, and we have a Bucky and I have a soon to be Hall of Fame receiving friend who is in love with Troy Franklin. The 176 pounds is my hang-up, you know. And when you look at the guys who are having success year after year after year in this league at that position, they're sturdy, strong guys. So that's the thing that worries me. And I don't think he's like, you know, Devontae Smith in terms of, you know, as a, you know, route runner that he is.
Man, it's and I agree with you completely, but man, it feels like as of late, we're going in that direction, right? Everybody's getting lighter. Like all these receivers, there's so many receivers.
They got hurt. Like that's the Tank Dell argument. Because I've had this. We talked about Tank Dell last year. We're like, okay, gosh, I love him as a player. He's unbelievable, but his size. And then for the first half of the season, all the people that were in on him, and I liked him too. I'm not saying I didn't. I had a good grade on him, but people were beating their chest. And then at the end of the year, the guys who dinged him were beating their chest saying, yeah, he couldn't post. He didn't finish. So and, you know, that's the argument there that you know it's difficult.
So I have a question. Let's go to the defense side of the ball real quick, and we can talk about either pass rushers or corners. Which group are you more passionate about? And pick the players that maybe we're sleeping on within that group. We know the top names, but who are some of the notable names in that group that you want to talk about?
Okay, let's talk about corner, because I like a lot of the corners in this class. And, you know, I think everybody knows a lot of the big five, right? Cooper DeJean, Nate Wiggins, Quinyon Mitchell, Terrion Arnold, Kool-Aid McKinstry, those guys. I think everybody kind of knows those, but I like the smaller dudes in this class too. You know, Mikey Sanders still, I know people are just on him now and everybody like him. Javon Bullard too. I like Javon Bullard more as a slot corner than I do a safety. And if I had like a group of my guys in this class, Javon Bullard would absolutely be one of them. I mean, you don't get on the field early at Georgia unless, no pun intended, you are a dog. Like you can really go out there. You're not afraid to stick your nose in things. You're not afraid to get after it as a tackler. And it just feels as though the more I listen to DB coaches, defensive coordinators, when they talk about corners, yeah, athleticism is a prerequisite, but tackling, being afraid to be physical. I mean, you guys actually talked about this not too long ago. I was listening to an episode of you guys, and you're like, man, with as much quick stuff that's going on in today's NFL, if you can't rally to the ball and dependably bring a guy down, that's you got to get knocked for that, dude. And that's why I have Cooper DeJean as my CB1 in this class for that reason. You've got that versatility. I'm never going to be afraid that this dude can get off the block, help and run defense, help with screens, help with slants, things like that. And so I think that that's really huge. But another corner who I just wanted to shout out as a deeper corner in this class is Max Melton. Max Melton from Rutgers is somebody who I really liked going into the season. Up and down year this past year on tape, but then he goes to the Senior Bowl. I get to watch him in person, get to watch him up close and personal. And man, I loved how he looked from the slot. And I thought even last summer, I was like, man, this guy's got some inside out versatility to him. I like the slot. Then he goes to the combine. He absolutely blows it up athletically. And that to me was just like, all right, I'm back in, baby. We're back in where we were in the summer. I like Max Melton a ton. So those are a handful of guys in this corner class that maybe a little smaller, maybe not as big as the guys who are going to go drafted a little ahead of them, but really good football players, and that's what matters most.
I love that. I have Melton and Abrams Drain. Those are the top two corners outside my top 50, so they're right there. I think they're both going to end up going in the second round. They're good football players. Javon Bullard, by the way, I had talked to several teams that said he was one of the best interviews that they had, including like the story about when you go to put on the tape. So for those who don't know, you're in the combine room. You're sitting there, you put the tape on, and you're going to ask a player to explain, you know, what the call was, what his technique was, you know, what his thought process was working through the play. So they queue up a specific play. And it was like a third down. I'm just use that as an example. They said, so it's static on the screen, and I just see the down and distance, the opponent, the time of the game. So they go, all right, well, we're going to get to some tape here. And he goes, all right, well, this is 3rd and 7 before they've even pushed play. He goes, this is 3rd and 7. Before we get to this play, on 1st down of this series, they ran blank play. We had this coverage. They ended up getting 2 yards, but we ended up, making a mistake here. 2nd down, they went bing, 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 bing. Now we get to this 3rd down right here because of, knowing the situation and what we had seen the previous week against this team. We had a good feeling when they lined up in this, and everybody in the room was like, we haven't even pushed play yet. And this guy's told us the 2 previous plays, what's going to happen in this play. I mean, they said there's a reason you don't get on the field that early at Georgia unless you're 2 things, incredibly talented and really freaking smart. And that's what Bullard was.
I think about that with a lot of those top programs. Georgia, absolutely one of them, especially on that defensive side of the ball. Again, you said, you don't get on the field unless you love the game of football and have the ability and the mentality to do what is required of you. And this guy played safety. He played slot. Like, that's a tough assignment. You're going to open against all different sorts of size and shape receivers. It's tough anyways, but Bullard is somebody who is just in my top 50 because, again, he's the kind of football player I want on my team.
Well, this has been awesome, man. Trevor, we could do this for an hour, buddy. This has been great stuff. We appreciate all the work that you do, and we love everything that we get as a partner with PFF. So we are greedy there with all that you guys provide us and all that you serve the public with all this information. So we appreciate your time. Hopefully, we'll catch up again here before we get to April.
Yeah, appreciate you guys. Y'all 2 are the best. Keep educating people and keep killing it.
Well, Buck, that was a fun one. Get a chance to talk about free agency and some of the moves we saw there, and then a great visit there with Trevor. Again, that's Trevor Sikkema. If you haven't, be sure to check out his podcast, NFL Draft Podcast with Connor Rogers, who's another one who does really good work around the draft. 2 good dudes, passionate about it and do their homework. So appreciate him joining us as well. Anything else you want to add before we get out of here?
No, those conversations are also always great, man. It kind of reminds me of being back in the draft room at the end of a day where you have these last conversations about little things that have interest. So it was great to kind of scrimmage some of those ideas with Trevor. He did a really good job.
Yep. Yeah, really good dude. And again, appreciate all the good stuff we get from PFF and all the access to be able to break down the film and every kind of cut up imaginable is a huge, huge asset. As well as, by the way, I've never asked you this. Have you ever messed around with the mock draft simulator, Buck?
I have done that. I know you and
Red
are big,
man.
I mean, I know it's a lot. It's a lot. You kind of get in there, and if this happens and that happens, and it all pops. It's almost like when you basketball, like I think NBA has like a trade simulator where you kind of mess around and do all the other stuff.
That's fun.
It's always fun to allow your inner GM to come out.
I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Caleb Williams with the 4th pick. This is incredible. They switch up the algorithm. So every now and then you get a little bit of an outlier like that. But anyways, it's a fun tool. If you get a chance, go check it out over there at PFF Ultimate. All right, that's going to do it for us today. Hope you guys have enjoyed the episode. We'll be back next week. I've got a new mock draft coming out, so we'll break that down early next week, and we can have some fun with that one. Until then, hope you have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next time right here on Move the Sticks.